The metal bench bit into her thighs, cold and merciless. Her hands veined. Fragile clutched her coat tighter as the wind whispered promises it would never keep. They were late. She told herself that, again, the same way she had last Sunday. And the Sunday before that. And every Sunday for the last 8 weeks. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Grace Winslow. 84. Once a schoolteacher. Once a mother of 3. Once a wife. But now, mostly, she was a waiting woman. The last time they came, it had been summer. The kind where heat clings to your skin like regret. The kids had melted ice cream all over the back seat, and they laughed. God, how they laughed. Her son, Daniel, had kissed her cheek as he left. We'll be back soon, Ma. I swear. Maybe even next weekend. The kids miss you. She remembered how his voice cracked when he said it, just enough to feel like truth. She remembered how her granddaughter Emma waved both hands from the window, her baby fingers spread wide like sunshine. But it was October now. The leaves had turned the color of rusted pennies. Her birthday had come and gone. No one had called. At 3:45 p.m., the bus hissed to a stop in front of the community center. She stood instinctively, brushing off the creases in her skirt. The driver didn't look up. No one got off. No one was there to greet her. She sat back down. Around her, the world moved in ways she no longer understood. Teenagers shuffled by with wires in their ears, their eyes glued to screens. A mother with a stroller passed, not sparing Eleanor so much as a glance. A dog barked in the distance, and the sun dipped lower behind the trees. She checked her watch again. It was still working, at least something was. Eleanor opened her purse and pulled out the letter. The ink had smudged at the corners, and the folds had worn thin. Ma, we're coming Sunday, I promise. Around 4. The kids can't stop talking about you. I'm sorry it's been so long. Work's been crazy. Traffic's always a mess. But we'll be at the gate. Love you, Ma. Daniel. She read it as if it were gospel. Every word carried the weight of a broken promise. She had raised Daniel with everything she had. A widow by 47, she worked nights, taught piano lessons on weekends. She remembered his scraped knees and late-night fevers, how she stayed up by his bedside humming lullabies until morning. He'd been her shadow once. Her little boy who begged for one more bedtime story, who cried when she missed a school play because of a double shift, who forgave her before she could forgive herself, and now forgot her in ways that hurt worse than silence. The community center behind her echoed with voices and laughter. The Sunday volunteers would start cleaning up soon. She didn't want to go back in. Not yet. Not until she was sure. What if they were stuck in traffic? What if he'd lost his phone? What if he was just around the corner? Eleanor's heart bloomed with excuses. It had to, because the alternative was too unbearable. Then the rain came. Not loud, not sudden, just a quiet drizzle that kissed the top of her head and dampened her coat. Her hair, curled carefully that morning, began to frizz. The bag on her lap darkened with wet spots. She didn't move. At 5:30 p.m., a man from the center approached. His name was Miguel. Young, soft-spoken, always wore a brown corduroy jacket. He didn't ask questions anymore. He just sat next to her with a blanket and a warm cup of tea. "You can wait inside, Mrs. Winslow," he said gently. "They're just late," she whispered, not looking at him. Miguel nodded, as he always did. She didn't need pity. She needed presence. "Did you know?" she said after a while, voice trembling. "He used to make me breakfast on my birthday? Scrambled eggs with ketchup. Every year. From age 7 to 19. Miguel smiled softly. "He sounds like a good son." Eleanor nodded, tears burning her eyes. He was. At 6:15, the last car pulled out of the lot. The gate creaked shut. No headlights. No laughter. No small hands waving from a window. Just silence. She stood slowly, her knees stiff, dignity intact. She folded the letter and placed it back in her bag, next to a tin of mints and an old photo of Daniel in his graduation gown. Inside the center, the heater buzzed and the hall smelled like soup. She walked past the board of paper turkeys the kids had made. On each one, a crayon scrawl of what they were thankful for. Families. Puppies. Pizza. She passed a mirror near the entrance. Stopped. The woman staring back looked older than she remembered, but her eyes, they were the same ones that had waited at school gates and hospital doors. They had known the ache of hope. She brushed a raindropper, maybe a tear from her cheek. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow they'll come. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. Not for lack of trying, she'd taken 2 of the little white pills the doctor prescribed and laid on her side like always. But sleep avoided her like so many other things had lately. The clock on her nightstand blinked 2:04 a.m. The hands made a faint tick that seemed louder in the silence. A storm was rolling in now, lightning flashing through the drawn curtains. She reached over and turned on the small lamp, bathing her tiny bedroom in a golden glow. She didn't like the dark knot since Harold passed. His picture still sat beside her, in a brass frame worn with touch. His smile hadn't changed. She sometimes spoke to him in the quiet hours. "I waited again today," she whispered, brushing a hand over the image. "You'd have told me to stop. But I couldn't. What if it's the day he does come?" She paused. "What if I miss it?" The wind howled outside. The rain pelted the window in sharp, erratic rhythm. Still, Eleanor sat there, wrapped in a faded quilt, her bones aching with memories. She reached for the small box under her bed and pulled out an old journal. The pages had yellowed, the ink faded in places. She ran her fingers over the first entry. April 9th, 1965, Daniel walked for the first time today. A tear traced the curve of her cheek. She turned the pages slowly, as if they might crumble. Her life had been documented in that journal: skinned knees, school dances, lost teeth, and late-night fevers. She remembered it all. Every page was a fingerprint of motherhood. How many times had she rewritten his bedtime stories? How many sandwiches had she packed with handwritten notes? And now her words were the only ones left in that book. No return notes. No recent entries. Just memories, always her memories. The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight sneaking through the window slats. She rubbed her eyes, her throat dry and heavy. Sunday had passed. It was Monday now. She didn't wait at the gate today. She knew they wouldn't come on a Monday. Daniel worked Mondays. The kids had school. But still, she sat by the window, the one facing the road. Just in case. Miguel knocked around 10, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're spoiling me," she said softly as she opened the door. "You deserve it." He always said that. She wondered if he truly meant it. They sat at her small kitchen table, the silence between them as familiar as the worn edges of her placemats. "You know," she said slowly, "when Daniel was 15, he stayed up all night to help me sew costumes for the school play. He didn't complain, just sat there cutting fabric and singing Beatles songs." Miguel smiled. "He sounds like he really loved you." Eleanor looked down into her coffee. "I think he still does. Maybe he just forgot how to show it." "Maybe," Miguel said gently. "Or maybe he's hurting too, in ways you can't see." That stopped her. She'd spent so long nursing her own pain that she hadn't thought of Daniel's. Maybe life had broken him, too. Maybe the weight of adulthood had made him forget what Sundays used to mean. Still, it didn't make the silence easier to bear. That evening, she took a walk through the garden outside the center. The fall air was crisp, and leaves crunched under her shoes. She passed the bench where Mr. Callahan used to feed the squirrels. He hadn't come back after his fall. She hoped someone visited him, wherever he was. She paused under the maple tree. A gust of wind carried a child's laughter, not real, just memory. She remembered Emma's squeals when she tried to catch the falling leaves. And little Max, chasing after her with sticky fingers. She missed them. Terribly. Not just their faces but their chaos, their warmth. The noise, the crumbs, the way they climbed into her lap without asking. The way they'd say "Grandma," like it meant something sacred. Her house was too clean now. Too quiet. She stopped and looked up at the fiery canopy of leaves. "I'm still here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I still remember every second of you." 2 more Sundays came and went. Each time, she waited. Each time, she read the letter again. Each time, the gate remained closed. The ache began to settle deeper in her bones, no longer sharp but dull, constant, like an echo that refused to fade. Miguel came every week, sometimes with tea, sometimes with pie. Once, he brought her a photo of his mother, who had passed 2 years ago. "She used to wait for my calls," he confessed. "Sometimes I didn't call. I thought she understood. But now I'd give anything to hear her pick up again." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed his hand. They didn't need to say more. On the 3rd Sunday, Eleanor didn't wait by the gate. She stood at the window at 3:55, her hand resting on the sill. At 4 o'clock, nothing. At 4:05, a car turned the corner. It was Silver, not Daniel's. She closed the curtain slowly and stepped back. She didn't cry. She just sat down in her chair and closed her eyes. It was easier now to expect nothing. Easier than hoping. Then, the phone rang. She startled. The rotary phone on her table hadn't rung in weeks. Her heart pounded. She crossed the room quickly, hands shaking. Picked it up. "Ma." Her breath caught in her throat. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Yeah. I'm sorry I haven't called. It's been crazy. The kids were sick. And work." "I understand," she said quietly. She didn't. Not really. But she wanted to. "I've been thinking about you a lot. Emma asks about you all the time." She closed her eyes. "Tell her I miss her." "I will." A pause. Heavy. Careful. "Listen, Ma. I know we said we'd come. And I meant to. But sometimes I just get overwhelmed. And then it's Sunday again, and I feel awful. I don't know how to explain it. But I'm sorry. I really am." Eleanor sat down, the phone pressed to her ear like a lifeline. "I'm not angry," she said. "I just miss you. I miss you too." "Then come." Another silence. "Okay," Daniel whispered. "Next Sunday. No excuses." She didn't respond immediately. Finally, all right. They said goodbye. The dial tone rang in her ears long after she hung up. She stared at the receiver. He had said it before. But this time his voice had cracked again, like it did that first time. And she wanted to believe that meant something. That night, Eleanor didn't eat much. She warmed the soup that came in the community meal delivery, stirred it twice, then pushed it aside. Her stomach had shrunk over the years, not from age, but from expectation, turned cold too many times. She turned off the lights and lay in bed, watching shadows crawl along the ceiling like quiet regrets. She wanted to believe Daniel this time. She wanted it with a desperation that scared her. But wanting was dangerous. Wanting left bruises. Still, she held his voice in her chest like a hymn and whispered into the dark, "Please mean it this time." The week passed slowly, like molasses sliding down glass. Eleanor busied herself with chores she had already done. She dusted the shelves twice, repotted the same plant, rewrote the grocery list though she didn't need anything new. On Thursday, she walked to the park. She didn't go there often anymore, not since her knees had begun to betray her. But the sky was kind that day, a soft blue tucked in behind wisps of clouds, and something in her chest needed air. She sat on a bench overlooking the duck pond. Children ran along the trail with plastic swords, chasing each other with wild joy. One boy tripped and fell near her, scraping his knee. Before his mother could reach him, Eleanor was already crouched down. "Oh, honey, that'll sting for just a moment," she said, gently brushing dirt from the skin. The boy looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "It hurts." "I know," she said softly, "but it'll heal faster than you think." The mother arrived a second later, breathless but grateful. She thanked Eleanor and walked away holding her son, his sobs already fading into curiosity as he pointed at the ducks again. Eleanor sat back down, her hands still tingling with the memory of mothering. She had almost forgotten what it felt like. Friday brought rain again. Not the gentle mist of before, but a hard, hammering storm that made the windows shudder in their frames. Eleanor stood in the hallway of the community center, watching through the glass. The garden beds flooded, petals torn away by wind and water. Leaves stuck to the pavement like flattened confessions. Miguel found her there. "Storm strong today," he said. She nodded, her gaze fixed outside. "Do you think he'll still come Sunday? Even if it rains?" Miguel hesitated. "If he said he will, then maybe." "Maybe," she repeated, voice barely above a breath. He stood beside her in silence, not offering false hope. She appreciated that. Before he left, he said, "You've waited a long time. That takes strength, you know." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Or foolishness. Sometimes they're the same thing." Saturday night, Eleanor couldn't sleep again. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, flipping through photo albums. There was Daniel on his bike at age 6, one front tooth missing. There he was in his awkward teenage years, hair too long, smile crooked. His prom night, his college graduation, his wedding. Eleanor traced the edge of each photo with reverence. She had been in all of it. And then, slowly, she had been in less and less. She lingered on one picture: Daniel, Emma, Max, and herself in the backyard, for summers ago. She was holding Max on her lap, laughing as bubbles floated through the air. Daniel stood behind them, arms crossed, smiling faintly. He looked tired, even then. She wondered now if she had missed the signs, if he had been slipping away long before she noticed. Sunday. She rose early, dressed in her best sweater and skirt, the navy one with white buttons. She curled her hair carefully, pinned it back like she used to when Daniel was small and they'd go to church on Sundays. She packed a bag, candy for the kids, a jar of her apple jam Daniel used to beg for, a scarf she'd knitted for Emma, a worn toy car Max had left behind last visit. At 3:30 p.m., she walked to the gate. The wind had calmed. The sky was heavy but clear. She sat on the bench, smoothed her skirt, folded her hands, waited. 3:45. A blue sedan turned onto the street. Her heart leapt. It passed. She exhaled, chest sinking. 4 o'clock. The gate creaked as it always did. Still no car. She looked down the road, eyes dry this time. Her hands trembled not from age, but from the memory of disappointment tightening in her blood. And then, headlights. A silver SUV. It slowed, turned in. She stood. Her legs almost gave out as the car pulled up beside the gate. The door opened. Daniel stepped out. He looked older, paler, his hair thinner, his eyes unsure. He opened the back door. Emma and Max climbed out. "Grandma!" Emma shrieked, running toward her. Eleanor dropped her bag and knelt just in time to catch her. The girl's arms wrapped tight around her neck, warm and real and alive. Max followed, slower, but grinning. Daniel approached, hands in pockets. "I told you we'd come," he said softly. Eleanor looked up at him, tears brimming. "You did." He knelt beside her. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Ma. For all of it." She touched his face. "You're here now." Inside, the center smelled of baking bread. Miguel had left fresh flowers on her table. The kids chased each other through the halls. Emma begged for stories. Max asked for cookies. Daniel sat at the table, hands around a mug of coffee Eleanor made with too much sugar just the way he liked it as a boy. They talked. Really talked. About school. About work. About Harold. About grief. About love. Night fell, but no one rushed to leave. They stayed until the children fell asleep, curled on the couch beneath Eleanor's quilt. Daniel looked at his mother. "We should do this more." She smiled. "You should." And then she said something she hadn't said in years. "I'm proud of you." Daniel lowered his head. "I'm trying, Ma." "I know." She brushed a hand through Emma's hair, held Max's tiny foot in her lap. The silence between them now was not painful. It was full of presence, of forgiveness, of beginnings. The next morning, sunlight filtered in through the lace curtains Eleanor had crocheted 30 years ago. On the couch, Emma stirred under the quilt, blinking sleep from her eyes. Max still slept soundly, thumb in mouth, nestled beside his sister like a cub tucked against its den. Daniel was in the kitchen, standing awkwardly by the kettle. Eleanor walked in slowly, her feet padded in soft slippers. "You remember where the mugs are?" she asked, her voice light. He smiled sheepishly. "Second cabinet, next to the window." "Some things don't change." She reached past him for the tea bags, her hand brushing his. The touch startled them both. So familiar, and yet it had been so long. "I didn't mean to drift away, Ma," he said suddenly, before the water even boiled. Life just got loud. Eleanor didn't speak. She let the quiet settle in first, let him feel the weight of his words. "I wasn't just busy. That was an excuse. Sometimes I didn't call because I didn't know what to say, or I was ashamed." Her brows furrowed. "Ashamed of what?" "I don't know. Letting you down. Not being the kind of son who checks in, who visits every Sunday, who brings the kids like I should have. You gave me everything, Ma, and I gave you silence." Eleanor inhaled sharply. Her chest ached in that old, familiar way. "You gave me you. That's what I wanted. That's all I've ever wanted." Daniel's eyes reddened. He turned away to open the cupboard. "Emma talks about you like you're magic, and Max thinks you live in a fairy tale cottage or something." Eleanor chuckled. "It's just a house with a broken heater and too many books." "Yeah," he smiled, "but they talk about it like it's holy. Like something worth believing in. They believe because you told them stories about me." Daniel nodded. "And because I believed them too. I just forgot how much I needed you." She reached for his hand. "Then remember now, while there's still time." That afternoon, they drove to the park together. Eleanor held Emma's hand as they walked, her small fingers sticky from the caramel popcorn Daniel had bought from the vendor. Max rode on Daniel's shoulders, giggling each time he saw a squirrel. They sat under a tree Eleanor had picnicked beneath with Harold in 1972. The memory came back in pieces. The lemonade, the ants, The song Harold had sung off-key while brushing crumbs off his shirt. Daniel laid out a blanket. They ate sandwiches Eleanor had made, simple ham and cheese, the way Daniel used to love. As they ate, Emma pulled out a sketch pad. "I drew you something," she said proudly. The picture was crude stick figures and wild scribbles, but the image was unmistakable. A tall boy holding hands with an older woman, two little kids running beside them. "It's us," Emma said. "Yesterday, when we got here." Eleanor stared at it like a masterpiece. "It's beautiful." Max climbed into her lap and handed her a small pine cone. "For you, Grandma." Eleanor kissed the top of his head. "I'll keep it forever." Later, they sat watching the clouds. Daniel lay beside his mother, arm behind his head, like he used to when they went camping as a child. He turned to her. "Do you ever get lonely, Ma?" She took a long time to answer. "Yes, but it's not the silence that hurts. It's the absence of voices, of mess, of people who remember who you were before your hair turned white." Daniel closed his eyes. "I remember. That's why I waited." They lay there quietly, a family rediscovering how to breathe together. Back at the center, Miguel greeted them at the door with a knowing smile. He helped Eleanor carry the leftover sandwiches to the community fridge and winked at Max, who was still clutching his juice box like treasure. Daniel pulled Miguel aside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being here when I wasn't." Miguel simply nodded. Some debts didn't require repayment, just recognition. That evening, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, Eleanor tucked Emma into the guest bed. "Grandma?" the little girl asked sleepily. "Yes, darling." "Why did Daddy cry this morning?" Eleanor paused. "Because sometimes love feels like tears, not just hugs. And sometimes, when people come back after being away, their hearts hurt a little." Emma nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "I like when we're all together," she whispered. "It makes everything feel warmer." Eleanor smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's what families are meant for." Daniel lingered after the children had fallen asleep. He stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit street. "I have to go back tomorrow," he said. Eleanor didn't flinch. She had prepared herself. "But we'll come again. In 2 weeks." The kids already made plans. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Plans?" He laughed softly. "Emma wants to make cookies with you. Max wants to build a spaceship out of shoeboxes. And I want to fix that squeaky gate. It's been squeaky for 10 years. Then it's long overdue." They stood together for a long while, neither needing to speak. Then Eleanor reached into her drawer and pulled out an envelope. "These are some old letters you wrote me as a kid. I kept them all." Daniel took the envelope gently. "You always saved everything. Because everything mattered." He looked down at the envelope, then at her. "I missed so much. You're here now." The next morning, Eleanor stood at the gate again. But this time not alone. She hugged them all as they left, Emma waving wildly from the back seat, Max blowing exaggerated kisses through the window. Daniel leaned out the driver's side. "I'll call Tuesday." Eleanor smiled. "I'll be waiting." The car pulled away, disappearing down the street. But this time, the silence that followed was different. Not heavy, not empty. It was full of memory, of laughter echoing through the walls, of tiny fingerprints on windows, of warmth left behind like a footprint on soft soil. Eleanor went inside and sat by the window. She didn't need to read the letter anymore. She didn't need to guess. She had been seen again. The following weeks passed with a rhythm Eleanor hadn't known in years. On Tuesday, as promised, the phone rang. Daniel's voice was calm, more grounded than she remembered. "Emma wants to know if you can teach her how to bake pie next time." Eleanor smiled. "Only if she promises not to eat all the crust before it bakes." Daniel laughed. "That's not a promise I can guarantee." It was the kind of conversation they hadn't had since he was in college, before the jobs, before the bills, before the weight of life pulled him under. He called again Friday, then Sunday, then the week after that. True to his word, 2 weeks later, they were back. And this time, Daniel brought more than just the kids. He brought time. He brought tools. He brought a box of rusty nails and WD-40 and fixed the squeaky gate without being asked. Eleanor sat on the porch, sipping tea while the children played tag among the garden beds, and Daniel crouched by the hinges, grunting as he worked. "You know," she called out to him, "your father tried to fix that gate 20 years ago. He gave up after 20 minutes and said, 'Let it sing.'" Daniel looked up, sweat on his brow. "Well, maybe I'm more stubborn." "No," she said, her voice dipping gently. You're just more tired of missing things. That evening, they cooked together. Eleanor gave Emma the task of slicing apples with a butter knife, while Max tried to mash potatoes with more enthusiasm than success. Daniel peeled carrots silently, his presence filling the room in a way it hadn't in decades. Midway through dinner prep, he stopped. You did this every night. I never realized how much effort it took. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She reached for the salt and sprinkled it across the roast like it was a memory. I didn't do it for the praise, Daniel. I did it because I loved seeing you fed. Safe. Whole. Daniel swallowed. I should have said thank you more. Eleanor shook her head. You said it in your laughter. You said it every time you came home late from practice and still kissed me goodnight. Love isn't always loud. Daniel turned to her. No, but neglect is. And I let it ring for too long. She met his eyes, then to oceans weathered by storms, both seeking land. You're here now, and I'm not counting backward anymore. As the months passed, Eleanor bloomed again. Miguel noticed it first. She stood straighter. She hummed while trimming her rose bushes. She joined the Tuesday book club again, no longer skipping weeks. She's different now, one of the other residents said. There's a glow about her. She didn't talk much about Daniel's return, not because she didn't want to, but because some joys were too sacred to be reduced to small talk. Instead, she saved the stories for Sundays, when Emma curled into her lap and asked for just one more. When Max dragged her outside to collect rocks that were apparently magical. When Daniel sat with her after everyone else had gone to bed, and they shared peppermint tea like they once did when he was 8 and convinced monsters lived in the closet. But time, as it always does, carried its own agenda. In late spring, Eleanor began to tire more easily. At first, she brushed it off, blamed the pollen, the humidity, the change in weather. But deep inside, she knew something was shifting. Her body felt heavier, her dreams more vivid, like flickers from another life preparing to close the curtain. One morning, she didn't wake until nearly noon. Miguel knocked gently. When she didn't answer, he used his spare key. She was fine just sleeping, but the way she held her chest afterward, how she moved with effort, told him what she wouldn't say aloud. She was slowing. Daniel noticed it next visit. You look pale, he said. Have you seen the doctor? I've seen enough of them in this lifetime, she replied with a tight smile. But later that night, she took his hand. I'm tired, Daniel. He didn't let go. Then rest. We'll be here. That's not what I mean. He swallowed. Ma, I'm not afraid, she said. Just sad that I wasted so many Sundays sitting alone. Daniel's voice cracked. Don't say that. Please. She looked at him, really looked, and smiled. You came back. That's what matters. You gave me what I thought I'd never have again. You made me feel needed. You've always been needed. I just forgot what it felt like. Summer came, and with it, Eleanor's final season bloomed gently, not with drama, but with a soft, lingering goodbye. The family came every weekend. They brought puzzles, lemonade, stories, mismatched socks, and joy. They filled the house with the kinds of noise Eleanor once only dreamed of, again: tiny feet pounding down the hall, Emma's singing in the shower, Max shouting about dinosaurs. One evening, Eleanor sat with Daniel in the garden. The roses had blossomed in late June, their petals wide open like grateful palms. I wrote something for the kids, she said, handing him a sealed envelope. Daniel hesitated. Is it time? Not yet, but close. He nodded slowly. What do you want me to tell them? He asked. Tell them I love them. Fiercely. Tell them I waited because love is patient. And tell them I left full, not empty. Daniel's throat clenched. You're not leaving yet. No, she said, smiling. But I want them to know that I never felt forgotten. Not after you came back. The last Sunday, the family gathered as always. They played cards, ate pie, took photos. That night, Eleanor went to bed earlier than usual. When Daniel checked on her at midnight, she was asleep, a faint smile on her lips. She didn't wake the next morning. At the funeral, the chapel was filled not with strangers, but with stories. People came from every corner of her life. Former students, neighbors, residents, volunteers. Miguel cried hardest of all. Daniel gave the eulogy. He stood before a small crowd, his son clinging to one side, his daughter clutching a drawing. He held up a letter, Eleanor's handwriting still firm. She wrote, Love waits. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't expire. It simply holds out its hands and believes someone will reach back. That was me. Every Sunday. Every gate. I wasn't waiting for apology. I was waiting for connection. And now, I go in peace, knowing that came back to me. Daniel paused. And she was right. We reached back. Not as soon as we should have. But love is patient even when we aren't. In the months after, Daniel kept the gate oiled. He visited the center once a week. Brought cookies. Donated books. Sat at the bench where his mother used to wait. Emma planted roses in Eleanor's name. Max carried the pine cone in his backpack. Sometimes, they still looked toward the gate half expecting to see her standing there, bag in hand, eyes full of hope. And in a way she was. Because some people never really leave. Especially those who waited long enough to be found again.